Hello everybody and welcome to another video tutorial. Now this is the second portion for the Barlangais piece. So essentially last video I actually showed you how to clean up the line work to get more of a finished product in Photoshop. Now for this week's video for this video itself, I'm going to actually show you the painting process that I took in order to do this image. Now, when I first started out with this image, I started sampling the initial colors that I had in my original concept to get a rough idea of some of the colors that might or might not work. At this stage, I'm also looking at some reference material to make sure that the color palette I'm choosing would work once again together. I'm not worried about staying within the lines at this stage because I know that I've already created a rough masking layer in the previous version where I essentially grayed out this part of the drawing. So painting outside the lines, not a big issue at this point, because I'm going to create a mask later on and then just essentially isolate the regions that I actually want to show this painting process in. So once I've figured out a couple of different colors that I'm going to use and I've started sampling some of the colors from my original concept, I start playing around with the shading and the structure that I already have in there. Because for rocks, you generally have multifaceted areas, there's some hard edges, there's some soft edges, it's a combination of multiple elements and shading, which really does give it a more naturalistic look. So once I've added those basic colors in, then I just start color picking the colors that I already have. And I start refining some of those detail elements, adding some highlights where I think I can add a bit more information and make it read a bit more clearly, adding some shadows in areas where I just need to show a bit more form. So I keep on switching between those two aspects until I run into something that works really well. Now, since I did have the very strong earth tones for the rocks, I was going for more of a cold color palette for the pylon or the pillars. These pillars still have to work with the rest of the piece though, so I am including some of those same colors that are in the rock formation into the pillars as well. So the difference is very subtle. But you notice that because I'm sampling throughout and moving between these aspects, that I have a very similar color palette. One's mainly desaturated though in the pillars. So this entire painting process took about 5 to 6 hours to complete. So it was a bit longer to do this portion, but it was also a lot of fun. I do enjoy the painting process, so this made things very enjoyable at the same time. So although I've already figured out the line art, I keep on adding some darker areas to break apart some of the formations I already have. Now, since this portion I'm currently working on is just a little bit further back, I want the colors to still match, but I want to have a more desaturated look. It needs to be a bit more cooler because it's receding into the background, so atmosphere is actually getting in the way of essentially being able to see all the colors. So I'm darkening up certain areas, and I keep on moving in between the two until I'm satisfied with what I have, because I do want to have a very good contrast between them. I need to show that there's depth and that certain parts are receding backwards, so emphasizing certain things is really important to help do so. So just working on some structures here. And I've just started working on the ground elements. Once again, I'm sampling colors that are already existing so that when I add these in, everything ties together. Now, since this is going to be essentially made out of wood planks, I did need to change the color a little bit. But once again, I have to make sure that all the colors still work in conjunction. So I'm playing with the hue and saturation a bit just to get the colors that I need. So I've actually added another layer on top, and I've started adding some more saturated colors. But I'm playing around with this because I don't want to have too much of oversaturated look either. So I made it really saturated to begin with and then tone back some of those elements afterwards. Now, since this part that I'm currently working on is all the way in the back, you're barely going to see any color variations because it's so far back in the background. Now, there is color variations. After I finish actually filling in the basic information, I start adding those color variations in there. but they're very subtle, so unless you're actually looking for them, you won't actually see them. You can barely see them in the rocks. It's more of a desaturated color that I added in there. So I just added essentially some atmosphere gradient. So I used the gradient tool and put it on inclination to help give the illusion that certain parts are receding a little bit further. I will end up playing a lot with that later on because I wasn't satisfied with the overall look, but I did get it to work in the end. Once again, I'm just trying to break up the form a bit more to make the foreground elements very interesting to look at and appealing. And I'm just sampling the colors that I already have in there and switching back and forth and testing things out as I go to see what areas I want to bring out more than others, if I want to bring out certain areas, and by how much. Now, at this point in time, this area is very brightly colored. It's too brightly colored in comparison to the rest of the image. I need to darken it. And you will see me do that actually very shortly. I will add a separate layer on top of the foreground elements to darken up those parts, and then add a bit more of a saturation to them to really add a bit more color. Just refining some of those background portions, so I'm just adding some additional details in there to help fill up the space. And now I'm adding some of the light rays so that you can actually see where the light source is coming from. In the final image, you will actually see that I colored those light rays, and I also added some moss to give a bit more variation in the colors that I already have. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys soon, so thank you and take care.